within chess, we call it concrete calculation versus maybe intuitive calculation. So the idea here is there's certain situations in a game of chess, and it's the same in life and in business. So like it's the perfect analogy for, that carries over. But in chess, there's these moments in the game that require intuition versus concrete calculation. And in concrete calculation, you need to go through the moves and the different permutations of those moves and calculate them out to a specific endpoint. Because if you miss the calculation, it's all for naught. So this tends to happen in very highly tactical situations where, okay, I'm about to sack my queen. If you're about to sack your queen, you need to calculate out the exact win condition that's going to follow. You don't just sacrifice your queen because you think it's going to give you an advantage. You sack your queen because you've calculated the alternatives and you've calculated them out as far as you can see. And at that point, you believe there is a deterministic win condition that will be decisive. If you can't find that, you should not sack your queen just off of intuition, right? That would be the wrong move. But there are situations where you can just make the intuitive move because you have enough, you know there's enough of an advantage on the board. Okay, if this plays out, I should have enough of a concrete advantage given the pieces where they're at, my material advantage, the initiative advantage that I have. I don't need to know specifically how it's winning. I just know it's probably winning, and probably winning is good enough in that situation. But there's a lot of situations in chess where you need to be concrete, and you do not go down a path unless you can concretely prove it beforehand. And this is like specifically the most important phase of a chess game, which is also ironically the place that like beginners spend the least amount of time. And it makes sense because, well, the most important phase of a game is the end game, because that's where most games are ended, right? So you have the beginning, you have the opening. That's usually the first 5 to 10 moves. You have the middle game, which typically is occurring between maybe this move 10 and maybe move 25. End game is typically when the queens come off the board and most of the other pieces. So you're down to pawns and maybe a rook or something like that, right? It's the boring phase of the game, but it's also the phase of the game where intuition will not usually carry the day. Intuition is usually more useful earlier in the game, but concrete calculation is critical at the end, because the difference of being on this square versus that square after a 15 move sequence is the difference between winning and losing. And because you actually do have the ability to calculate out to the end condition, because there's not so many pieces, right? Yeah. In the beginning of the game, you can't be as concrete because you have all the pieces on the board and you're not a grandmaster. So you don't have the ability to calculate all the permutations. But at the end and so you play more on intuition. You calculate what you can, but you play on more intuition, right? For most beginning chess players and intermediate chess players, their intuition is not very good. So they lose to the grandmaster, who can also calculate and they have better intuition. So it's like, that's why you're fucked. But when you get to the end of the game, now there's fewer pieces on the board. There's fewer options. Therefore, you do have the ability to calculate more concretely versus intuition. But the reason beginners stay beginners is they don't know how to make that transition. So they take it to the end game and they're still moving off of intuition, and then they blow a completely won end game, or they draw a position that they should have won. And it's because they didn't take the time to calculate out exactly, okay, if I move here, he moves here, I move there, he moves here, then I move there. At the end of that sequence, is it winning or is it losing? If it's losing, don't do that sequence. Find the winning sequence. And you have to calculate a number of variations usually to find the concrete win. Yeah. But I think about this, and I mean, you could use this in the context of business. There's situations where you just need to make your intuitive guess. Like, I believe that this marketing initiative is going to land. It's similar to other patterns we've executed in the past. It's a product that we know has had success. We know we have demand from the audience. There's a high probability that this is going to win. And also, we're not going to bet the entire farm on this investment. And therefore, if it doesn't work out how we thought, not a big deal, because we're going to be able to recoup our losses by selling it at a discount, whatever, right? So you have contingencies. You can make a more intuition-based decision in that situation. But you have other situations where it's like, okay, we're going to bring in this completely new product. We're going to try to penetrate a completely new market with a completely new demographic. We don't know how our current demographic is going to react to it. It's going to be a big investment. So if this fails, there's not a lot that we can do. You need to calculate out concretely before you pull the trigger on that. And so the examples that we used at Escape Climbing, because, you know, in a manufacturing environment, there's a ton of products that you're producing that you know intuitively are going to sell. There's a ton of products that you're making that you don't think, that you're not sure, and you need to make a big investment to make the thing to even see if it's going to work. And so we use the frame of firing bullets before cannonballs. So bullets is, how do I shoot little bullets? The analogy here is from like the nautical times. If you were on a boat in the ocean and you saw, you know, pirates coming at you, you wouldn't just start firing your cannonballs at them, because if you miss trying to triangulate the distance, you only have so many cannonballs. By the time you triangulate it, you might be out of cannonballs, but you probably have a lot more bullets that you can fire. So you use the bullets, you find the trajectory, and then you lock in and fire your cannon. So you fire bullets before cannonballs. And it's all about the idea of firing little test projects, little test ideas, experiments, and theses to see if it hits the market with that product or with that demographic, and then scaling up. Right. And that would be like part of like the concrete calculation. Okay, we now we know we can hit it. Let's calculate this out. Cool. Now we can do that. The wrong thing would just be to fire the cannonball. And that would be like, you only ever make intuitive moves based off of firing bullets. You never do it with your cannonballs. You don't fire cannonballs based off of intuition. You do that off of concrete calculation, which needs to be preceded by the bullets. So that's how I think about it.